The vastness of space holds many mysteries, but aboard the SS Vanguard, the quietest presence went almost unnoticed. Kira Voss was a human engineer unlike any other aboard the ship. Unlike the crew of vibrant, talkative alien specialists, each flaunting their unique customs, colors, and languages, Kira was silent, watching, calculating, and moving with subtle precision. Kira's silence was often mistaken for weakness or disinterest. Her alien crewmates whispered behind her back, calling her the mute human or silent shadow. They dismissed her as someone who lacked the charisma or presence needed for the high-pressure environment of space exploration. Despite the dismissiveness, Kira carried herself with calm confidence, never raising her voice or seeking attention. The SS Vanguard was a state-of-the-art exploration vessel, crewed by members from multiple star systems under the Galactic Coalition. Its mission was ambitious, to explore the Genra Nebula, a recently discovered but poorly understood region filled with chaotic energy fields and spatial anomalies. The nebula was both feared and coveted for its potential scientific breakthroughs and its dangers. As the ship entered the edges of the nebula, tension hummed through the corridors. The alien crew were excited and anxious. The captain, a tall and imposing Xeran named Velcor, led with confident commands but often dismissed concerns from the lower ranks, especially from Kira. Her reports on minor irregularities in power, flow, or hull stress were brushed off as routine fluctuations. Kira spent most of her time in the engineering bays, monitoring the ship's systems. She noticed strange patterns, faint but consistent, of energy leakage in the ship's outer hull, the very part exposed to the nebula's wild forces. She also detected microfractures forming along the hull's surface, almost imperceptible but alarming in their persistence. To her, these were warning signs of something far worse. Despite her growing concerns, she remained silent during group meetings, choosing to analyze data quietly rather than argue with the outspoken alien officers. When she did voice her worries, her quiet tone was overshadowed by louder, more dismissive voices. The alien engineers, proud of their advanced technology, refused to believe the ship was in any real danger. Kira's isolation deepened, but so did her resolve. She worked longer, hours running simulations and scanning the hull with sensitive instruments. She understood the stakes. If the ship's structural integrity was compromised, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for the crew but for the entire mission. Meanwhile, small glitches began to manifest. Power surges flickered across. The control panels, oxygen levels wavered briefly, and navigation instruments showed strange interference. The alien crew shrugged these off, blaming the nebula's chaotic environment. Yet Kira's instincts told her these were symptoms, not isolated events. As the SS Vanguard pressed deeper into the nebula's glowing clouds, the ship seemed to be under invisible assault, something unseen but deadly. Kira's silent vigilance was the only thing standing between the crew and disaster, though none yet realized it. In the background, tensions simmered not only with the ship's growing problems, but also among the crew themselves. The alien officers. Disdain for Kira created a subtle but toxic atmosphere. They failed to see that beneath her quiet exterior lay a sharp mind and a will to survive and protect. The first part closes with a sense of foreboding. The ship is entering a zone where danger is no longer theoretical. Kira's silent presence, overlooked and ignored, becomes the fragile line of defense against the unknown threats lurking just beyond the hull. Threats that would soon begin to bleed the ship to death. As the SS Vanguard ventured deeper into the swirling chaos of the Genra Nebula, the subtle warning signs Kira Voss had detected began to intensify. Yet the alien officers and crew, wrapped up in their own pride and prejudices, continued to dismiss her growing concerns. Kira's engineering station was a cramped, dimly lit chamber filled with humming consoles and glowing monitors. She spent long hours poring over streams of data, tracing patterns others couldn't see or refused to acknowledge. The energy leakage she first noticed had spread, and the tiny microfractures in the hull had multiplied and deepened. To Kira, it was no longer a matter of if, but when the damage would become critical. She meticulously compiled her findings and prepared to report them to Captain Velcor. Standing before the ship's command center, Kira spoke quietly, but clearly. outlining the risk of structural failure and the potential for catastrophic system breakdowns. However, the reaction she received was predictably cold. Velkor's stern eyes narrowed as he waved off her warnings, attributing the readings to sensor malfunctions or transient nebula effects. What you call danger is nothing but the nebula's natural turbulence, Velkor said dismissively, his voice echoing authority. We've traveled further into hazardous regions before without issue. Your fears are unfounded, human. Behind him, the alien officers exchanged skeptical glances. Some scoffed openly. The ship's lead engineer, a flamboyant and brash Zarnan, named Tarak, even sneered. Perhaps if you spoke more and observed less, you'd understand better. Kira's silence in the face of such derision only deepened the crew's underestimation of her. They equated quietness with weakness or ignorance. Yet, Kira was anything but ignorant. She quietly observed their arrogance and kept digging for the truth. Meanwhile, the SS Vanguard systems began to show troubling symptoms. Power fluctuations caused intermittent blackouts in non-essential systems. Communications with the Coalition Command became spotty and unreliable. Environmental controls struggled to maintain optimal oxygen and temperature levels. The crew grew anxious, but official reports insisted the ship remained stable. Kira, however, noticed these issues were not random, but linked to the expanding microfractures and unseen energy drains. The ship's hull was effectively bleeding vital power. She surmised the nebula itself was interacting with the ship's structure in an unprecedented way, something alive, something parasitic. Attempts by alien specialists to pinpoint the problem yielded no answers. Their sensors and technology, sophisticated though they were, failed to detect the root cause. Their confidence in their technology bred complacency. Kira's warnings were lost amid technical jargon and political power plays. Isolated and frustrated, Kira took to working after hours, running independent diagnostics and scanning hidden sectors of the ship. She documented every anomaly and anomaly pattern. Despite her silence, she became a lone sentinel watching a ticking clock. Tensions aboard the Vanguard began to mount. Alien crew members blamed the nebula's harsh conditions, while others whispered about the useless human who cried wolf. The atmosphere grew thick with mistrust and impatience, but no one seriously considered Kira's insights. Yet, the part closes with a palpable sense of impending disaster. The SS Vanguard is hurtling toward a breakdown far worse than anyone anticipates. The alien crew's refusal to heed the silent human's warnings has set them on a path toward catastrophe, with Kira standing as the only one fully aware of the danger bleeding through the ship's veins. The SS Vanguard plunged deeper into the heart of the Genra Nebula, and the once subtle signs of trouble became impossible to ignore. The ship was beginning to bleed, an eerie metaphor that soon became a terrifying reality. Systems that had been merely flickering before now failed outright. The lights dimmed unexpectedly across entire sections, leaving corridors in unsettling darkness. The environmental controls struggled to maintain safe oxygen levels and temperature. And even the ship's gravity stabilizers jittered sporadically. Panic began to ripple through the crew, though the alien officers tried desperately to maintain order. Kira Voss watched all this from her engineering bay, her quiet vigilance unbroken. She monitored energy flow readings with growing alarm. The strange bleeding was no longer just metaphorical. Vital power was leaking from the ship's core, sapping life from the vessel in a slow, deadly drain. It was as if the ship itself was wounded and bleeding out into the void. She compiled data from multiple systems, discovering a terrifying pattern. The energy loss corresponded with specific areas along the ship's hull. These spots showed accelerating microfractures and unexplained energy pulses, like invisible wounds opening and worsening with every moment. Despite the mounting crisis, the alien leadership remained reluctant to admit the danger. Captain Velkor, though visibly concerned, refused to halt their expedition or retreat from the nebula. The reasons were political and prideful. The Galactic Coalition demanded results, and a retreat would be seen as weakness. The alien officers, blinded by hubris and xenophobia, dismissed Kira's increasingly urgent warnings as exaggerations. Meanwhile, crew morale began to deteriorate. Rumors swirled about the mysterious force draining the ship's power. Whispered anxieties grew louder, and small groups whispered about abandoning ship at the earliest chance. The alien crew's disdain for Kira also deepened. Many accused her of sowing unnecessary fear, while others simply ignored her. Kira found herself increasingly isolated, but she refused to be sidelined. She knew the ship's condition was worsening by the minute, and time was running out. She began conducting secret investigations in hidden compartments and access tunnels, places overlooked by the main crew. Using her keen engineering mind and an intuitive grasp of the ship's complex systems, she detected anomalies that no sensor or alien technician had identified. Some parasitic presence was embedding itself inside the hull, siphoning energy and weakening the ship's integrity. Her discoveries were chilling. The creature or phenomenon feeding on the Vanguard was not merely a passive hazard. It actively drained the ship's vital energy, making it vulnerable to catastrophic failure. Worse, the parasite's influence was spreading, almost as if it were alive and aware. Realizing that time was critical, Kira began devising a plan to counteract the bleeding. She scavenged components from unused sections of the ship, modifying equipment to detect and contain the parasite's influence. Her plan was risky and required stealth, as she anticipated resistance from the alien officers who had already dismissed her warnings. As the ship's condition worsened, emergency alarms finally blared throughout the corridors, signaling system failures beyond repair. The alien crew scrambled to respond, but many were paralyzed by fear or disbelief. Kira's quiet resolve became the last beacon of hope. Though still ignored by many, she worked tirelessly, preparing to confront the bleeding wound in the ship's hull directly. Part 3 closes with a tense atmosphere. The ship is literally bleeding to death. The crew divided between panic and denial, and a silent human engineer standing alone against the invisible threat. The stage is set for a desperate struggle to save the Vanguard, or watch it fall. In the bowels of the SS Vanguard, far from the bustling command decks and panicked crew, Kira Voss worked with meticulous focus. The ship's slow but relentless bleed was no ordinary technical failure. It was something alien, something alive. Her investigation into the source led her to a shocking discovery that would change everything. Using her intimate knowledge of the ship's structure and the data she had painstakingly gathered, Kira traced the energy drain to several hidden locations deep within the outer hull, places that had been overlooked by the alien crew in their haste and overconfidence. Armed with portable scanners and improvised sensors she had engineered herself, she ventured into tight maintenance shafts and rarely accessed compartments. There she found the parasite, an alien organism, bioluminescent and almost ethereal in appearance, clinging to the ship's hull. It was feeding on the vessel's energy, draining power from the very systems that kept the crew alive. The organism's tendrils had burrowed into the ship's metal, fracturing and weakening it from inside out. Kira's scientific mind raced. This was not just a passive hazard. This parasite was intelligent, adaptive, and deadly. It was symbiotic, with the nebula, perhaps even native to it, using its strange properties to survive and propagate. The creature's feeding was invisible to the standard sensors and shielded by the chaotic energy of the nebula itself. She quickly documented her findings and prepared a detailed report, hoping that this proof would finally compel the captain and alien officers to act. But when she presented her evidence in the command center, the reception was icy. The alien officers, steeped in their own cultural biases and pride, balked at the idea that the ship was under siege from a living organism. Some accused her of hysteria or sabotage, while others refused to believe that such a creature could exist. Captain Velcor, caught between political pressure and his own doubts, reluctantly allowed Kira limited access to pursue a solution, but under close supervision and with heavy skepticism. The crew's morale was fragile, and admitting a parasite infestation felt like a failure of the Galactic Coalition's technology and strength. Despite this resistance, Kira wasted no time. She gathered a small, trusted team willing to listen, a few junior engineers and scientists who had begun to respect her quiet determination. Together, they began devising a plan to isolate and eradicate the parasite. Kira's approach combined engineering ingenuity and biological insight. She designed containment fields to cut off the parasite's energy supply and developed a prototype energy pulse device aimed at disrupting its cellular structure. However, deploying the device meant venturing deep into the parasite's nesting grounds, a dangerous mission requiring stealth and precision. The alien officers continued to underestimate Kira's resolve and the severity of the threat. Yet as more ship systems failed and vital sections deteriorated, even the skeptics began to glimpse the truth in her warnings. The tension aboard the Vanguard mounted. Kira's discovery forced the crew to confront the reality that their ship was not just battling the hazards of the nebula, but a hostile life form embedded within its hull. The stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. Part 4 ends on a note of grim determination. Kira, once ignored and sidelined, now held the key to the ship's survival. But the challenge ahead was immense. She would have to confront the parasite, directly convince a reluctant crew, and find a way to save the Vanguard before it bled to death. With the grim reality of the parasite infestation now undeniable, Kira Voss prepared for the most dangerous mission yet. The SS Vanguard was bleeding to death, its lifeblood draining through the infected hull, and the time to act was fast running out. Kira and her small trusted team would have to venture into the ship's most damaged sections and deploy the prototype energy pulse device, an untested weapon designed to sever the parasite's grip. The alien leadership grudgingly granted permission, wary of Kira's unconventional plan but recognizing no better option. Captain Velcor, while still skeptical, understood the stakes. The ship was deteriorating rapidly, and failure meant annihilation. The crew watched anxiously as Kira assembled her team, a mix of junior engineers and scientists who believed in her cause, ready to face the unknown. The mission began in near silence, the hum of the failing ship amplifying the tension. Navigating the narrow access tunnels and maintenance shafts, Kira's group reached the core infection zones where the parasite's tendrils had burrowed deep into the ship's framework. The glowing bioluminescent strands writhed along the metal surfaces, pulsing with an eerie light, a haunting reminder of the creature's alien nature and its parasitic hold. As the team set up the energy pulse device, complications quickly arose. The parasite seemed to sense the threat, reacting with violent energy discharges that disrupted equipment and threatened the safety of Kira's group. Power surges rippled through the ship, systems flickered, and alarms screamed intermittently, heightening the chaos. Kira's calm, silent leadership became vital. She directed her team with precision, keeping everyone focused despite the growing danger. Her understanding of the ship's systems allowed her to compensate for the parasite's energy interference, stabilizing the device just long enough to prepare for activation. Then came the moment of truth. Kira triggered the energy pulse. The device emitted a concentrated burst of energy, designed to disrupt the parasite's cellular cohesion and sever its connection to the ship's power grid. For a moment, the glowing tendrils convulsed violently before fragments of the creature began to disintegrate. However, the parasite was more resilient than anticipated. It lashed out in desperation, triggering a cascade of system failures. Structural alarms blared, and the ship trembled as fractures spread rapidly through the hull. The battle was far from over. With time running out, Kira and her team scrambled to recalibrate the device for a sustained pulse, hoping to overwhelm the parasite's defenses. Meanwhile, the alien crew sprang into emergency action, sealing off damaged sections and reinforcing the hull as best they could. Old grudges and distrust faded into the background as survival became the priority. The energy pulse roared again, this time sustained and focused. Slowly, the parasite's presence weakened, its grasp on the ship loosening as the tendrils retreated and fragmented. Vital systems began to stabilize, lights flickered back on, and environmental controls returned to normal. Yet the victory was not total. The parasite's damage to the hull had already caused critical fractures, and the ship was still vulnerable. The battle had bought precious time, but the Vanguard was far from safe. In the aftermath, the alien officers looked at Kira with newfound respect. Her silence had never been a weakness but a strength. a steady force amid chaos. The crew began to realize that ignoring the quiet human had nearly cost them everything. Part 5 ends on a bittersweet note. A desperate battle fought and won, but the war for the ship's survival was far from over. The SS Vanguard still bled, and Kira's resolve would be tested as the final reckoning approached. The SS Vanguard was a wounded giant, scarred by the parasite's brutal assault and still vulnerable to collapse. Yet within the dim corridors and flickering control rooms, one figure moved with quiet determination: Kira Voss, the silent human who had been ignored and underestimated from the start. With the parasite weakened, but the ship still bleeding energy, Kira knew the battle was far from over. The structural fractures threatened to tear the ship apart if not reinforced, and the power systems needed stabilization to prevent total shutdown. Time was critical. The alien officers who once dismissed her warnings now reluctantly granted her unprecedented access and resources. The Coalition's best engineers were pressed into her service, and Kira led the effort to patch the ship's wounds. Her calm, methodical approach quickly earned reluctant respect. Where others panicked, she remained focused. Kira devised a daring plan to reroute the ship's remaining energy reserves, using makeshift power conduits and emergency reactors, scavenged from non-essential sectors. She coordinated teams to reinforce the hull with emergency plating and structural supports. Her intimate knowledge of the ship's inner workings enabled her to identify weak points and prioritize repairs. Meanwhile, Kira's team worked around the clock, often in dangerous conditions where systems were failing and toxic leaks threatened. Her silence in command became a symbol of steadiness amid the chaos, inspiring even the most skeptical crew members to push forward. Despite the physical repairs, the emotional scars ran deep. Many crew members grappled with the shame of ignoring Kira's early warnings, and tension lingered in the corridors. But as systems gradually stabilized and the Vanguard regained power, a fragile hope blossomed. Kira also implemented new sensor arrays and monitoring protocols designed to detect any future parasite activity early. Her work transformed the ship's defenses, turning a once vulnerable vessel into a more resilient one. Finally, as the last emergency repairs were completed, Captain Velcor called a gathering in the main command deck. The ship was safe for now, but the crisis had changed them all. He publicly acknowledged Kira's crucial role in saving the Vanguard. The once dismissive captain praised her quiet perseverance, intelligence, and courage. For the first time, the crew saw her not as a silent outsider, but as a hero and indispensable leader. Kira's silence had never been a weakness. It was a strength forged through observation, patience, and unwavering focus. She had saved the ship from bleeding to death not with loud protests or demands, but with quiet determination and expert action. The story closes on a powerful note. A once ignored human proving that sometimes it is the quietest voice that carries the greatest power. The SS Vanguard, scarred but alive, continued its journey through the stars, forever changed by the silent human who refused to be ignored.